The polished mahogany door of the headmaster's office at Oakhaven Academy did not look like a barrier. It looked like an invitation. It was heavy, silent, and smelled faintly of lemon oil, standing as the gatekeeper to a tuition that cost more than most American families earned in a year. Julian Thorne adjusted his cuff, French silk, perfectly tailored, and checked his watch. He was 7 minutes early. In Julian's world, being on time was late, and being early was the only way to control the variables. He was a man who built skyscrapers. He understood structure. He understood that if the foundation was solid, the building would stand, no matter how high the winds tore at the glass. He had applied that same logic to Maya. When the adoption had been finalized 3 years ago, Julian had treated her future like an acquisition of a failing asset that needed restructuring. Not out of malice, but out of a desperate, clumsy love. She had come from a system of neglect, a foster network that was essentially a warehouse for unwanted inventory. He had brought her here to Oakhaven to give her the best tutors, the best nutritionists, the best environment. He believed, with the arrogance of a man who had never truly lost a negotiation, that trauma was just a variable that could be managed with enough resources. He reached for the brass handle, but stopped. Through the frosted glass panel to the left of the door, he saw movement. Not the headmaster. The angle looked out into the hallway of the primary wing. He shouldn't have been able to see it from the waiting area, but the afternoon sun was hitting the corridor at a sharp angle, turning the frosted glass into a semi-transparent screen. He saw the line of children. They were walking in single file, uniforms pristine, navy blazers, khaki trousers, skirts hitting exactly at the knee. They moved with a synchronized, fluid grace that was almost hypnotic. Silence was a currency at Oakhaven. Noise was low class. Noise was a sign of a lack of discipline. Julian prided himself on Maya attending a school that valued composure. Then he saw her. Maya was fourth in line. She was 10 years old, though her eyes often looked older, carrying a weight that Julian's money couldn't quite lift. But she wasn't walking in the line. She was walking beside it. To be precise, she was walking exactly 3 feet to the left of the other students. She wasn't lagging behind, nor was she rushing ahead. She was mirroring their pace perfectly, her hands clasped behind her back in the exact same posture as the others. But while the other children walked on the plush, central runner of the hallway carpet, a deep royal blue, Maya was walking on the bare hardwood floor, the tips of her shoes clicking softly against the varnish. Julian frowned, stepping closer to the glass. It looked like a game. The floor is lava. No, her expression was too rigid for a game. She was looking straight ahead, her chin slightly elevated. A teacher, a woman Julian recognized as Mrs. Gable, walked at the head of the line. She stopped at a classroom door. The line stopped instantly. Maya stopped too, maintaining that precise 3-foot gap. Mrs. Gable turned. She smiled at the children on the carpet. She said something Julian couldn't hear through the glass, and the children on the carpet relaxed. Shoulders slumped, heads turned, whispers broke out. They were kids again. But Mrs. Gable didn't look at Maya, and Maya didn't relax. Maya remained at attention. The other children began to file into the classroom, chatting, bumping shoulders. Maya waited until the last child on the carpet had entered. Then, without a word from the teacher, Maya sighed, stepped. She waited 4 seconds. Julian counted them instinctively, and then followed the group in, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. The door closed. Julian let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It was strange, certainly. Perhaps a disciplinary measure. Maya could be difficult. She had episodes, as the school counselors called them. Moments of withdrawal where she refused to participate. Julian had always deferred to the experts. If Oakhaven said she needed structure, he wrote the check for the structure. Hermit Thorne. The voice was soft, cultivated. Julian turned, Headmaster Sterling was standing in the open doorway of his office. He was a man who looked like he had been born wearing a tie. Silver hair, rimless glasses, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes but signaled supreme competence. "Headmaster," Julian said, smoothing his jacket. "I was just observing the transition." "Ah, yes, the midday movement. Efficiency is key to the academic mindset," Sterling said, stepping back to usher Julian inside. Julian walked in, the image of Maya walking on the hardwood still scratching at the back of his mind. He sat in the leather chair opposite the massive oak desk. The room was lined with trophies, debate championships, math Olympiads. It was a room of winners. Julian belonged here. "I asked you to come in today." "Julian, may I call you Julian? Because we're conducting our quarterly review of Maya's integration strategy," Sterling said, opening a beige folder. "Integration strategy?" Julian repeated. "Is everything all right? I saw her in the hall just now." She seemed isolated. Sterling didn't blink. He tapped a pen against the file, observant. "That is why you are a captain of industry. What you saw, Julian, is the parallel pathing protocol. Parallel pathing. Maya is a unique child. We all know that. Her background, it has left her with certain deficits in social synchronization. When she is in the main group, she becomes overstimulated, she acts out. She disrupts the flow of learning for herself and, crucially, for the other high-potential students." Sterling smiled benevolently. "So, we created a path for her, a physical boundary. It allows her to be with the class, but not of the class, until she earns her place in the center." Julian felt a cold prickle on his neck. She has to earn the right to walk on the carpet. She has to earn the right to belong to the collective rhythm. Sterling corrected gently. "It's psychology, Julian. We are conditioning her to value the group by showing her what it feels like to be adjacent to it. It's motivation. It creates a hunger for compliance." Julian looked down at his hands. He thought of Maya's face in the hallway. Blank, stoic. Was that hunger? Or was it something else? "She looked rigid," Julian said. "Like she was afraid to move. Discipline often looks like fear to the untrained eye," Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave. "Becoming confidential. You run a company, Julian. When an employee is underperforming, do you let them disrupt the boardroom? Or do you put them on a performance improvement plan? Do you give them clear, rigid metrics they must hit to return to the fold?" The analogy landed. It was a language Julian spoke. Metrics, KPIs, performance plans. It made the coldness of the hallway seem rational. It stripped away the emotion and replaced it with process. "And is it working?" Julian asked. "Her test scores are up 15%, Sterling said, sliding a sheet of paper across the desk. "She is quiet. She is obedient. She no longer has outbursts." Julian looked at the graph. The line was going up. That was what mattered. Results. If the method was unconventional, well, Oakhaven was an elite institution. They knew things he didn't. He was a builder, not a pedagogue. "I just want her to be happy," Julian said, the words feeling weak in the heavy air of the office. "Happiness follows order," Sterling said firmly. "Chaos breeds anxiety. We are removing the chaos from Maya's life. We are giving her the gift of structure. Trust the process, Julian. We are molding her." Julian hesitated. He had a meeting in 40 minutes across town, a merger that would secure his company's future for the next decade. He didn't have time to argue with a man who clearly had the data to back up his methods. He looked at the graph again. 15%. "Okay," Julian said. He stood up. "Okay, keep me updated." "Of course." Sterling remained seated, his smile fixed. "Oh, and Julian, we've implemented a new monitoring system in the classrooms. Video feeds. For parents to check in. Transparency is our motto. I'll have the IT department send you the login. You can see the parallel pathing in action. It's quite remarkable to watch the behavioral correction in real time." "I'd like that," Julian said. He shook the headmaster's hand. It was dry and cool. Julian walked out of the office. He passed the hallway again. It was empty now. The silence was absolute. He walked to the exit, his shoes clicking on the hardwood because the blue runner was roped off for cleaning. He felt a moment of kinship with the school. They demanded excellence. They didn't accept mediocrity. He got into his car, a sealed capsule of German engineering, and drove away. He told himself he was a good father. He told himself that he was paying for the best. He pushed the image of the little girl walking 3 feet apart from humanity out of his mind, and he dialed into his conference call. He didn't know it yet, but he had just signed the permission slip for his daughter's erasure. He had seen the glitch in the world, and he had called it a feature. The car merged onto the highway, speeding toward the city, leaving the quiet, manicured grounds of Oakhaven behind. The Oakhaven Insight app was a marvel of user interface design. It didn't look like a surveillance tool, it looked like a stock portfolio. The dashboard was sleek, minimalist, and dominated by soothing shades of slate, gray, and teal. On the screen of Julian's iPad Pro, propped up against a stack of architectural blueprints for a new luxury condo complex in downtown Chicago, the live feed from Classroom 4B streamed in high definition. It had been 3 weeks since the meeting with Headmaster Sterling. The initial discomfort Julian had felt in the hallway had been sanded down by the relentless friction of his daily life. His company was finalizing the merger, the market was volatile, and he simply didn't have the emotional bandwidth to question a system that was producing green metrics. And the metrics were, indeed, green. Every morning at 10:00 a.m., Julian received a push notification, daily synchronization report available. He would open the app and see a graph. Maya's disruptive indicators were down to near zero. Her focus retention was in the 99th percentile. The numbers told him he was a successful father. They quantified his love. He tapped the live view icon. The camera was positioned high in the corner of the classroom, offering a fisheye view of the space. The room was arranged in a Socratic circle, 12 desks facing inward, facilitating debate and eye contact. The students, children of senators, surgeons, and tech moguls, were animated. Even without sound, Julian could see the flow of the conversation. Hands waved, heads nodded, mouths moved in rapid succession. It was the training ground for the next generation of leaders. But the circle was not a closed loop. There was a gap, a deliberate break in the geometry, and 3 feet back from that gap, isolated on a small rug that looked like a distinct island in the sea of the classroom, was Maya's desk. She was facing the circle, but she wasn't part of it. Julian zoomed in. The resolution was crisp enough to see the expression on her face. It was placid. Her hands were folded on her desk, right over left. She wasn't taking notes. She wasn't raising her hand. She was simply watching. A notification banner slid down the top of the screen. Current module active listening and restraint training. Maya is currently in observer status. Observer status, Julian murmured, taking a sip of his espresso. It sounded professional, strategic. In the boardroom, the observers were the ones who held the power. They were the ones who gathered intelligence before striking. He convinced himself that Sterling was teaching her a form of executive dominance. He watched as Mrs. Gable walked around the circle, gesturing at a whiteboard. She stopped in front of a blond boy, the son of a federal judge, Julian recalled, and asked a question. The boy stood up, gestured wildly, and laughed. The class laughed with him. It was a moment of release, of human connection. Maya didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She turned her head slightly to the left, looking at a small digital clock on the wall. She held the gaze for exactly 5 seconds, then returned her eyes to the teacher. Julian frowned. Why did she do that? He tapped the microphone icon. He usually kept the sound off. He needed to focus on his own work. But curiosity pricked him. The audio hissed into his AirPods. Extraordinary chaos of the French Revolution, Mrs. Gable was saying. Now, who can tell me why structure is the antidote to anarchy? A hand shot up in the circle. Because people don't know what they want, the blond boy shouted without being called on. Correct, Timothy. Impulse is the enemy of civilization, Mrs. Gable said, praising the interruption. She turned her back to the circle and walked toward Maya's island. The audio seemed to amplify the silence around Maya's desk. Maya, Mrs. Gable said. Her voice changed. It lost the warm theatrical lilt it had used with the circle. It became flat, monotonous, like a recorded announcement. Status report. Maya stood up. Her chair didn't scrape against the floor. She lifted it slightly as she rose, setting it down without a sound. Observer status active, Mrs. Gable, Maya said. Her voice was thin, stripped of any inflection. The group is engaged in high energy exchange. The noise level is at a 7. The emotional variance is high. And what is your role? To absorb without reacting. To witness without participating. To be the vessel of calm. Correct. You may sit. Maya sat. Excellent, everyone, Mrs. Gable said, turning back to the circle, her voice instantly warm again. See how Maya anchors the room. She holds the silence so you can have the noise. She is performing a service for the collective. Julian paused the feed. He took the AirPod out of his ear and set it on the mahogany desk. She is performing a service. It felt efficient. That was the word. It was a division of labor. Some people were the engine, others were the coolant. Sterling had identified Maya's strengths, her quietness, her intensity, and given her a job. Most kids felt useless at school. Maya had a purpose. Julian's office door opened. It was Marcus, his CFO. Marcus was a large man who wore his wealth like a suit of armor, loud and heavy. Julian, the term sheets for the merger. Marcus dropped a binder on the desk. We need signatures by close of business. You look distracted. Everything okay? Julian gestured to the iPad. Just checking on Maya. The school has this new streaming integration. Marcus walked around the desk and peered at the frozen image of the classroom. He saw the circle. He saw the isolated desk. He didn't look shocked. He nodded slowly, appreciatively. O'Cavan, Marcus said, letting out a low whistle. They don't mess around. My nephew goes to St. Jude's, and it's a zoo. No discipline. This is order. She's in observer status. Julian explained, hearing the defensive note in his own voice and hating it. It's a behavioral modification program to help her focus. Smart, Marcus said. Look at her posture. Straight back. Eyes forward. Julian, do you know how much I pay in corporate coaching to get my junior analysts to sit still and listen like that? That's a $10,000 skill right there. You're getting a bargain. Julian felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was validation. Marcus was a shark. If he saw value in it, then there was value. Julian wasn't a bad father allowing his daughter to be ostracized. He was a visionary investor cultivating a high-value skill set in his child. It's intense, Julian admitted. Excellence is always intense, Marcus countered, tapping the binder. Softness doesn't build skylines, Julian. We know that. Now, sign the papers. We have an empire to expand. That evening, the normalization crossed the threshold of the home. Dinner at the Thorne penthouse was usually a casual affair, or at least as casual as it could be in a dining room with a 20-foot marble table. Usually, Julian would ask about her day, and Maya would give one-word answers while pushing peas around her plate. Tonight, the table was set. Maya was already seated when Julian arrived from the office. She was wearing her school uniform, even though it was 7:30 p.m. Maya, you can change into comfortable clothes, Julian said, loosening his tie. You're home. Maya looked at him. Her eyes were dark, unreadable. Uniformity reduces decision fatigue, father. Headmaster Sterling says that the transition between home self and school self creates unnecessary friction. I am maintaining continuity. Julian stopped pulling at his tie. Decision fatigue. Maya, you're 10. The brain is a muscle, she recited, cutting a piece of chicken with surgical precision. Unnecessary choices weaken the will. I am saving my will for the metrics. Julian sat down. The silence in the penthouse usually felt luxurious. Tonight it felt pressurized. Did you have fun today? Julian asked. He felt clumsy, like he was trying to speak a language he had forgotten. Fun is a variable of entertainment, Maya said. She chewed 20 times before swallowing. Julian counted. I had productivity. My observer status was commended. Gable said I absorbed the chaos of the room effectively. Maya, you're not a sponge, Julian said, a sudden flare of irritation rising in his chest. You're a little girl. You're supposed to play. You're supposed to make noise. Maya stopped eating. She placed her fork and knife down, parallel to each other. She looked at Julian with a terrifyingly adult expression of pity. Noise is for those who cannot control their interior state, she said softly. You shout on the phone, father. I hear you in your study. You pace. You have high emotional variance. Perhaps, she paused, tilting her head. Perhaps you need a parallel path, she finished. Julian froze. The fork halfway to his mouth hovered in the air. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't backtalk. It was a diagnosis. She was looking at him not as a father, but as a flawed system that required debugging. He laughed, a short, nervous bark. Maybe I do. Kiddo, maybe I do. He resumed eating. He didn't correct her. He didn't tell her to take off the uniform. He didn't ask her to explain what she meant by absorbing chaos. He let the comment slide because, deep down, a part of him wondered if she was right. He was stressed. He was chaotic. Look at her, calm, composed, eating her vegetables without complaint. The system was working. It was weird, yes. It was cold, yes. But it was working. He finished his meal in silence, mimicking her pace. When he finished, he placed his knife and fork parallel on the plate, just like hers. Maya looked at his plate, then up at his eyes. For a split second, the mask slipped, and he saw a flash of desperate, terrified approval. She nodded once. Good alignment, she whispered. Then she stood up, pushed her chair in without a sound, and marched to her room to study. Julian sat alone at the massive table. He poured himself another glass of wine. He told himself that he was bonding with her. He told himself that they were finally speaking the same language. He didn't realize that he wasn't learning her language. He was forgetting his own. He picked up his phone and opened the Oakhaven app. He scrolled to the parental feedback section and typed, "Improvement noticed at home. Structure is effective. Thank you." He hit send. It started with the shoes. 3 months into the parallel pathing protocol, Julian was hosting his annual gala. The Thorn Foundation raised millions for urban development, and the event was a glittering assembly of the city's power players. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. Julian wanted Maya there. He wanted to show her off, not as a prop, but as proof of his life's completeness. He had bought her a dress, a soft, pale blue chiffon that cost more than the car he drove in college. "Maya, honey," Julian called up the stairs. "The car is here." "We need to go." Maya appeared at the top of the landing. She was wearing the blue dress. It fit perfectly. Her hair was braided in a complex, rigid crown that must have taken the housekeeper an hour to construct. But on her feet, she wasn't wearing the delicate silver ballet flats he had purchased. She was wearing her school shoes. Black, polished, heavy, soled Oxfords. "Maya," Julian sighed, checking his watch. "The shoes, we talked about this. The silver ones." Maya walked down the stairs. Her gait had changed over the last few months. It was no longer the bounce of a child. It was a measured, gliding stride. Heel toe, silent. "The silver shoes have inadequate traction," Maya said, reaching the bottom step. "The ballroom floor is marble. The coefficient of friction is low. These shoes are safe. These shoes are compliant." "Compliant with what?" Julian snapped, the stress of the gala fraying his patience. It's a party, Maya. Not a drill. Go change. Maya stood still, her hands clasped behind her back. She didn't argue. She didn't pout. She simply stared at a point on the wall just past his left ear. Refusal to compromise safety protocols is a Tier 1 violation, she whispered to herself. What? I cannot change them? She said, louder this time, her voice trembling slightly. If I slip, if I fall, I disrupt the flow. I become a variable. I cannot be a variable. Father, please. There was real panic in her eyes now. Not the panic of a child afraid of being scolded, but the panic of a soldier who has lost their rifle in enemy territory. Julian looked at the heavy black shoes clashing with the delicate chiffon. He looked at the terror in her eyes. He had two choices: force the issue and risk a meltdown that would make them late, or accept the absurdity and move on. He chose the path of least resistance. He chose the metric of punctuality. Fine, he said, adjusting his cufflinks. Wear the damn shoes, but keep them under the table. At the gala, the pattern repeated. While other children, sons and daughters of donors, ran in packs between the tables, stealing horse do-overs and sliding on the dance floor, Maya stood by Julian's side. She stood exactly 3 feet to his left. When a waiter dropped a tray of champagne flutes, the crash silenced the room. The other children laughed or shrieked. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't even turn her head. A colleague, Sarah, the CEO of a rival logistics firm, leaned in. My God, Julian, she's unflappable. My twins would be screaming their heads off. How do you do it? She's focused, Julian said, taking a sip of scotch. He felt a swell of twisted pride. Oh, Cavan, they run a tight ship. I need to get the name of that headmaster, Sarah said, watching Maya with envious eyes. I'd kill for that kind of composure. Later that night, Julian found Maya in the coat check room. She wasn't retrieving a coat. She was arranging the hangers. The coat check girl, a teenager with purple hair and a nose ring, was watching her with a confused expression. Maya was moving down the rack, spacing the coats exactly 2 inches apart. Maya, Julian asked. The density was uneven, Maya said without stopping. The airflow was compromised. I am rectifying the distribution. She's been doing this for 20 minutes, the coat check girl said, popping her gum. I told her to stop, but she just said she was optimizing the asset storage. Weird kid, man. Julian grabbed Maya's shoulder. We're leaving. I am not finished. The section J through L is still clustered. Now, Maya. In the car, silence reigned. Julian looked out the window at the passing city lights. He felt a gnawing unease in his gut, but he tamped it down. She was quirky. Genius kids were always quirky. Look at Musk. Look at Zuckerberg. Social deficits were the price of high-level processing. The next morning, the pattern escalated. It was Sunday. Julian woke up late. He walked into the kitchen to find the contents of the refrigerator on the counter. Milk, eggs, juice, leftovers, condiments. Everything. Maya was standing there with a ruler. Maya, what are you doing? The refrigerator organization was inefficient, she said. You had high-frequency items in low-access zones. The milk was behind the Thai leftovers. That adds 3 seconds to retrieval time. Multiplied by 365 days, that is 18 minutes of lost productivity per year. She was wearing her uniform again, on a Sunday. I put it back, Julian said, rubbing his temples. I don't care about retrieval time. I care about my kitchen not looking like a warehouse. It is a warehouse for calories. Maya corrected him. I have created a schematic. She held up a piece of graph paper. It was a perfect diagram of the refrigerator shelves, labeled with items. Julian looked at the paper. It was drawn with the precision of a CAD file. Who taught you this? Headmaster Sterling introduced the domestic efficiency module last week, Maya said. He said that order must bleed outward, that we cannot be orderly at school and chaotic at home. That is hypocrisy. Are we hypocrites? Father. Julian looked at his daughter. She was waiting for an answer. The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a test. "No," Julian said softly. "We aren't hypocrites? Then let me finish the optimization." Julian walked away. He went to his study and closed the door. He didn't want to watch her arrange the mustard bottles by height. He sat at his desk and opened the OCAVN app. He scrolled through the past week's reports. Monday optimization of hallway movement. Success. Tuesday vocal modulation training. Success. Wednesday emotional suppression drills. Success. He stopped at Thursday. Thursday. Peer correction initiative. He clicked on the video link. The classroom. The circle. But this time, Maya wasn't in the corner. She was standing in the center of the circle. The blond boy, Timothy, was sitting in a chair in the middle. He was crying. "Timothy has violated the noise protocol 3 times today." Mrs. Gable's voice was smooth, encouraging. "Maya, as the exemplar of the week, you have been granted the authority of correction. What is the remedy for Timothy's lack of control?" Maya stood over the boy. She didn't look malicious. She looked like a doctor examining a patient. "Isolation is the remedy," Maya said. "He must be removed from the collective until his frequency matches the room tone." "And who shall escort him?" "I shall." On the screen, Maya took Timothy by the arm. He was bigger than her, but he didn't resist. He was sobbing, slumping. Maya walked him to the door, opened it, and gently pushed him into the hallway. She closed the door. She turned back to the class. "The disruption has been excised," she said. The class clapped. A polite, rhythmic applause. Clap, clap, clap. Julian stared at the screen. His daughter had evicted a classmate. She had done it without anger, without joy. She had done it like she was taking out the trash. And the other parents, the judges, the surgeons. He checked the comments section under the video. User Judge Dad. Finally. That kid was a distraction. "Good job, Maya." User K Mom. Leadership potential. Very impressive poise. User Tech Teton. "We need more of this. Accountability." A Julian read the comments. They were cheering for it. They saw a leader. They saw a future CEO who could fire people without blinking. He felt a sudden, vertiginous shift in his perspective. He had been worried that Maya was being abused. But she wasn't the victim anymore. She was becoming the enforcer. He looked at his own reflection in the iPad screen. He looked tired, weak. Maya was strong. Maya was optimized. He heard the refrigerator door close in the kitchen. He typed a reply in the comment box. User Julian Teed Architect, proud of you, honey. Leadership is tough. He didn't believe it, but he typed it. Because if he didn't, he was the variable. And in this new world, variables were excised. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, flagged with the high priority red exclamation mark that OCAVN reserved for tuition hikes and gala invitations. But the subject line was different. Manandi Daito RY parent, student alignment session. Julian opened it. "Dear Mr. Thorne, we are pleased to announce the final phase of this semester's integration strategy. To ensure the durability of the behavioral modifications we have instilled, the home environment must mirror the academic environment perfectly. Inconsistencies create cognitive dissonance. On Friday at 7:00 p.m., you are required to attend an alignment session in the Great Hall. Please bring Maya. You will participate in a live demonstration of the Unity of Will protocol. Note attendance is a prerequisite for re-enrollment." Julian stared at the screen. Unity of Will. It sounded like a cult pamphlet or a corporate retreat slogan. But the thread at the end was clear. Prerequisite for re-enrollment. He couldn't pull her out now. Where would she go? Public school. She would be eaten alive. She walked in silence. She spoke in metrics. She organized refrigerators by airflow. In a normal school, she would be bullied relentlessly. Here she was an exemplar. Here she was safe. Friday came. The Great Hall of OCAVN was a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows that depicted scenes of classical mythology. Hercules slaying the Hydra. Prometheus bringing fire. The room was filled with folding chairs arranged in concentric circles. Parents sat in the outer ring. Students sat in the inner ring, facing their parents. The silence was absolute. Julian sat across from Maya. She was 3 feet away. Her knees were pressed together, hands folded in her lap. She looked through him, focusing on the knot of his tie. Headmaster Sterling stood in the center of the rings, a microphone in hand. He looked less like a headmaster and more like a revivalist preacher bathed in a spotlight that cut through the dim room. We live in a world of noise. Sterling began, his voice echoing. A world of conflicting signals. Your children come here to find clarity, but then they go home, and what do they find? He paused. They find compromise, he whispered. They find softness. They find parents who negotiate with terrorists. And let us be clear, an untrained child's impulse is a terrorist. It holds the family hostage. Heads nodded in the outer ring. Julian saw Sarah, the logistics CEO, murmuring agreement. She looked exhausted. She wanted someone to tell her it wasn't her fault. Tonight, Sterling said, we break the cycle of negotiation. Tonight we align, students stand. The inner ring stood up in unison. The sound of 100 chairs scraping back was a single, sharp crack. Parents stand. The parents stood slower, more ragged. Tonight, we will purge the weakness, Sterling said. You will look at your child. You will identify one flaw, one moment of weakness from the past week where you failed to enforce order, and you will confess it to them. You will ask for their forgiveness, not for being too strict, but for being too lax. A ripple of unease went through the room. Confess to the children. I will demonstrate, Sterling said. He walked over to a tall, lanky boy in the front row. Christopher, last week. I allowed you to keep your library book 1 day past the due date without a fine. I prioritized your comfort over the rules. I weakened you. Forgive me? I accept your correction, headmaster, the boy droned. Sterling turned to the room. Begin. Julian looked at Maya. She was waiting. Her face was a mask of expectation. Go on, Julian, she whispered. Cleans the data. Julian felt a lump in his throat. He looked around. Parents were muttering. I let you play video games for an extra hour. I didn't check your homework. I let you eat dessert before dinner. It was a chorus of absurdity. Adults apologizing for kindness. Julian looked into Maya's eyes. He remembered the night he let her wear the black shoes. He remembered the night he didn't stop her from reorganizing the fridge. He remembered the silence at the dinner table. Maya, he said, his voice low. I'll say it, Father, she urged, her eyes widening with a fanatical intensity. Identify the failure? I didn't stop you from arranging the coats at the gala. Julian stammered. I let you act, strangely. I didn't correct you immediately because I didn't want a scene. I prioritized my social standing over your structure. Maya nodded slowly. It wasn't forgiveness, it was validation. You failed to provide boundaries, she said. You allowed chaos to persist. Do you commit to higher vigilance? Yes, I commit. Then I accept your correction. She sat down. Julian sat down. He felt sick. He felt like he had just handed over the keys to his own house. Good, Sterling's voice boomed. Now, phase 2, the rejection of the variable. Sterling gestured to the side of the room. A door opened. Mrs. Gable walked in. But she wasn't alone. She was leading a dog. It was a golden retriever puppy. Fluffy, clumsy, wagging its tail so hard its whole body shook. It was the embodiment of pure, chaotic joy. The students stared at the dog. For a moment, smiles appeared. Eyes softened. A collective, ow, threatened to break the silence. Silence? Sterling barked. The room froze. This? Sterling pointed at the puppy, who's a variable. It is cute, it is charming, and it is an engine of disorder. It sheds, it barks, it demands attention without earning it. It is everything we are training you to resist. Gable let the puppy off the leash. It bounded into the center of the circle, yapping happily, sniffing shoes, looking for a friend. It ran to Timothy, the blond boy. He reached out a hand. "Timothy!" Sterling warned. "Do not engage." Timothy froze. He pulled his hand back. The puppy whined and moved on. It came to Maya. It stopped at her feet. It looked up at her, tail wagging, tongue lolling out. It put its paws on her knee. Maya looked down. Her hand twitched. Julian saw it. A tiny, microscopic movement. She wanted to pet it. She was 10 years old. She loved animals. Before Oak Haven, she had begged for a cat. "Maya," Sterling said softly, "the variable is invading your space. It is disrupting your perimeter. What do we do with variables?" Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. "Don't do it," he thought. "Just pet the damn dog. Be a kid." "Maya," Julian whispered. "It's okay." Maya didn't look at Julian. She looked at Sterling. Then she looked at the dog. "Variables must be neutralized," she said. Her voice was shaking, but the words were the script. "Demonstrate," Sterling commanded. "Reclaim your space." Maya stood up. The puppy fell back, surprised. She pointed a finger at the door. "Leave," she commanded. The puppy didn't understand. It barked playfully. "I said leave," Maya shouted. It was the first time Julian had heard her raise her voice in months. It was a harsh, guttural sound. She stomped her foot on the floor. Hard. The heavy black Oxford shoe slammed against the wood. The puppy yelped, startled by the noise and the aggression. It tucked its tail between its legs and scrambled backward, skidding on the floor. It ran toward Mrs. Gable, whining. Mrs. Gable scooped the puppy up and marched it out of the room. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. "Excellent," Sterling said. "You chose order over sentiment. You chose strength over cuteness. You are becoming iron." He started to clap. The parents, trained by the rhythm of the room, joined in. Julian clapped. His hands felt like dead meat slapping together. He looked at Maya. She was standing tall, chest heaving slightly. She wasn't looking at the door where the puppy had gone. She was looking at the floor, at the spot where she had stomped her foot. She was crying. Silent, single tears rolled down her cheeks, but her face remained totally immobile. No sobbing, no grimacing, just the hydraulic release of excess fluid. Tears are just a physiological response to stress, Julian remembered reading in one of the school's pamphlets. Ignore them. Focus on the behavior. He focused on the behavior. She was standing still. She was compliant. He stopped clapping, but the room didn't. The applause grew louder, a thunderous ovation for the death of childhood. Sterling caught Julian's eye across the circle. He nodded, a subtle gesture of conspiracy. "We are building something great," the nod said. Julian looked away. He looked at the stained glass window. Hercules slaying the Hydra. He realized then that the Hydra wasn't a monster. The Hydra was the human spirit. Cut off one head, the impulse to play, and two more spring up, the impulse to control, the impulse to obey. Oak Haven wasn't killing the monster. They were training it to bite its own tail. "Session dismissed," Sterling announced. Julian walked over to Maya. He wanted to hug her. He wanted to pick her up and run out the door. But she stiffened as he approached. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, a sharp, precise motion. "My ocular ducts malfunctioned," she said. "Apologies. Let's go home, Maya," Julian said. "Yes, home. I need to review my biology notes. The sympathetic nervous system is complex." She turned and walked toward the exit, 3 feet away from the other students, hitting her stride. Heel, toe, heel, toe. Julian followed. He didn't lead her anymore. She was leading him. The notification came during a board meeting where Julian was systematically dismantling a junior architect's proposal for a community park. "Green space is unmonetized latency," Julian said, hearing the echo of Headmaster Sterling in his own voice. "Pave it. Put in retail kiosks. Control the flow." The junior architect looked crushed. Julian felt nothing. His phone vibrated against the mahogany table. OAVADMURGENT disciplinary tribunal required. Attendance mandatory. Julian checked the time. 2:00 p.m. He stood up. Meeting adjourned, he said, leaving the stunned room without looking back. The tribunal was held in a small, windowless room off the main library, known euphemistically as the resolution chamber. The walls were soundproofed with gray acoustic foam. A single long table dominated the space. Headmaster Sterling sat at the head. To his right sat Mrs. Gable. To his left sat a woman Julian didn't know. A woman in a faded cardigan, clutching a purse that had seen better days. Her eyes were red, rimmed with the raw, puffy exhaustion of a mother who knows she is fighting a losing battle. In the center of the room, 2 chairs faced the table. In one sat Maya. She was perfectly still, her hands clasped on a stack of dossiers. In the other sat a boy. Julian recognized him. Leo, the scholarship student, the son of the woman in the cardigan. Leo was small, with wild curly hair and ink stains on his fingers. He was trembling. Mr. Thorne. "Thank you for prioritizing this," Sterling said, gesturing to an empty seat next to Maya. Julian sat down. The air in the room was stale, recycled. "We are here to address a critical breach of the community standards," Sterling announced. "Maya has filed a formal efficiency audit regarding student Leo." Julian looked at his daughter. "An audit? Of a student?" "Correct," Maya said. She didn't look at Julian. She didn't look at Leo. She looked at the data in front of her. Leo represents a consistent drag on the collective cognitive load. I have documented the instances. She opened the dossier. It was thick. Item 1, Maya read, her voice devoid of inflection. October 14th, Leo hummed continuously during silent reading. Decibel level 15. Disruption duration 4 minutes. 3 students lost focus. "I was just humming," Leo whispered. "I didn't mean to. Intent is irrelevant," Maya said. "Impact is metric." Item 2. October 16th, Leo dropped his pencil case. 34 items scattered. Recovery time 45 seconds. Visual distraction. "Hi! He's a child!" The woman in the cardigan burst out. "He's just a clumsy boy." "He's brilliant at art. He's kind. Kinness is not a KPI," Sterling interrupted softly. "Continue, Maya." Item 3, Maya said, turning a page. October 20th. Leo attempted to initiate imaginative play during recess. He encouraged 3 other students to pretend the jungle gym was a spaceship. This deviated from the structural exercise regimen. It introduced fantasy. Fantasy creates dissatisfaction with reality. Julian felt a cold sweat prickling his hairline. This wasn't bullying in the traditional sense. It was bureaucratized cruelty. Maya had weaponized observation. She was hunting the human moments and marking them as errors. The recommendation, Maya concluded, closing the folder, is immediate extraction. The unit is defective. Reintegration is statistically unlikely. The silence that followed was heavy. Leo's mother stood up. She was shaking. "You're talking about my son like he's a broken toaster. He's on scholarship. If you expel him, we lose everything. This is the only chance he has to get into a good university. Please." She looked at Julian. "Mr. Thorne, you're a father. Look at your daughter. Do you think this is right? She's acting like a machine. Tell them this is insane." Julian looked at Maya. She was waiting. Her expression was expectant. She had done her job. She had identified the weak link. She expected praise. Then he looked at Leo. The boy was looking at his shoes, defeated. He was the variable. He was the puppy. He was the mess. "Mr. Thorne," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a low, confidential register. A moment outside, Julian followed Sterling into the hallway. The door clicked shut, sealing the weeping mother and the silent girl inside. "It's a tragedy, of course," Sterling said, smoothing his tie. "The boy is talented in his way, but he doesn't fit the mold. Maya is destroying him," Julian said, his voice raspy. She kept a log. Sterling. For weeks, she stalked him. She monitored him. Sterling corrected. She showed initiative. She is protecting the integrity of the class. She's 10 years old. She shouldn't be auditing her friends. They are not friends, Julian. They are colleagues. And here is the reality. Sterling stepped closer. The benevolent mask hardened. Maya's report is formally filed. It is in the system. If we dismiss it, if we say that Leo's behavior is acceptable, then we are saying that Maya's judgment is flawed. We are saying that her observer status is malfunctioning. Julian froze. So, if Maya is malfunctioning, Sterling said, she will need to be recalibrated. We have a facility for that. Off-site, intensive. It involves complete sensory deprivation. To reset the baseline, it takes months, and when she comes back, she might be different, less sharp, broken, perhaps. The trap snapped shut. Julian stared at the headmaster. It was a binary choice. Choice A, save Leo, validate his humanity. In doing so, label Maya as defective and send her to a psychological torture chamber to be recalibrated. Choice B, I validate Maya, confirm her audit, destroy Leo's future, expel a poor kid who just liked to hum and pretend, keep Maya safe, keep her perfect. You're making me choose between a stranger's life and my daughter's sanity. Julian whispered. I am asking you to choose between the system and the variable, Sterling said. The system protects its own. Are you part of the system, Julian? Julian looked through the small glass window of the door. He saw Leo's mother holding Leo's hand. They were clinging to each other, a tableau of messy, chaotic love. He saw Maya sitting alone, straight back, hands folded, waiting for the verdict. She looked so small, so fragile in her rigidity. If he failed her now, if he let them take her to some off-site facility, he would lose her forever. He had already lost her soul. He couldn't lose her body, too. He hated himself. The hate was a physical thing, a black bile rising in his throat. But he was a builder. He knew about foundations. You don't build on a crack. You fill it with cement. Let's go back in, Julian said. They re-entered the room. The mother looked up, hope flaring in her eyes. Julian walked to the table. He stood behind Maya. He placed his hands on her shoulders. They were stiff, unyielding. I have reviewed the data, Julian said. His voice sounded like it was coming from a speaker in the ceiling, detached and metallic. And? Leo's mother asked, breathless. The audit is sound, Julian said. He didn't look at the mother. He looked at the wall. The disruptions are documented. The impact on the learning environment is undeniable. No! The mother screamed. You're lying! He's just a boy! Maya, Julian said, gripping his daughter's shoulders tighter, using her as an anchor to keep from drowning in his own guilt. Your assessment is correct. The variable must be removed. Maya didn't smile. She simply nodded once. Understood. Sterling stood up. The decision is ratified. Leo, you are expelled effective immediately. Security will escort you off the premises. Two large men in blazers entered the room. They had been waiting. They lifted Leo out of the chair. He didn't fight. He just went limp. Mom! He wailed. The mother lunged for Julian. You monster! You rich, heartless monster! Look at what you've turned her into! She's a robot! She's dead inside! Mrs. Gable stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Please maintain decorum, madam. They dragged them out. The screams faded down the hallway. Monster. Monster. The room fell silent. Julian stood there, his hands still on Maya's shoulders. He felt a vibration running through her. Was she crying? Was she shaking with the aftermath of the confrontation? He looked down. She wasn't crying. She was tapping her finger against the dossier. Tap, tap, tap. It was a rhythm. Steady. Slow. Heart rate elevated to 110. Maya whispered to herself. Cortisol spike detected. Initiating breathing protocol. Inhale. Exhale. She took a deep breath. System stabilized, she said. She turned her head and looked up at Julian. Her eyes were dry, clear, terrifyingly empty. Thank you, Father, she said, for aligning with the truth. That was insufficient. Julian looked at her. He had saved her from the recalibration. He had kept her safe. But as he looked into those flat, dark eyes, he realized the truth. The recalibration wasn't a threat. It was already done. It had happened right here, in this room, when he chose the lie over the life. He had just cemented the final brick. "You're welcome, Maya," Julian said. "Can we go?" she asked. "I have a Mandarin proficiency test tomorrow. I need to optimize my sleep cycle." "Yes," Julian said. "Let's go." He walked her out. He walked past the empty chair where Leo had sat. He walked past the scuff marks on the floor where the mother had tried to resist. He walked out into the hallway, holding the hand of the executioner, telling himself he was a good father because he hadn't let the axe fall on her own neck. But the silence in the car on the way home was different this time. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum. The air had been sucked out of their world, leaving nothing but gravity and cold. 6 months later, the prestigious business magazine Forbes ran a cover story, "The Architect of Silence: How Julian Thorne is Redefining Corporate Efficiency." The photo showed Julian standing in front of his latest project, a 70-story residential tower that looked less like a home and more like a monolith. The windows were tinted so dark they were almost black. The headline didn't mention Maya. But Maya was the blueprint. Julian sat in his office, the magazine on his desk. He looked older. The gray at his temples had spread, claiming the territory of his youth. He didn't sleep much anymore. When he did, he dreamed of puppies being kicked and boys being dragged away. He picked up the phone. It was graduation day at Oak Haven. Not high school graduation. Maya was only 11. But Ascension Day, the ceremony marking the transition from the primary logic tier to the secondary executive tier. "The car is ready, sir," his assistant said. "Thank you." Julian walked out to the limousine. He didn't drive himself anymore. He found the act of navigating traffic, the unpredictability of other drivers, intolerable. He preferred the sealed environment of the back seat. The ceremony was held in the campus amphitheater. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. It felt like a mockery. Julian took his seat in the reserved section. The parents around him were beaming. They chatted about summer internships for their 11-year-olds, about coding camps in Zurich. Julian, it was Marcus, his CFO, big day. Maya's the valedictorian, right? Top of the class in what is it? See strategic compliance. Something like that, Julian said, forcing a smile that felt like a facial spasm. Incredible, Marcus shook his head. "You know, I'm thinking of sending my youngest here next year. St. Jude's is just too soft. They have feelings circles. Can you believe that? Feelings circles. Imagine that?" Julian murmured. The ceremony began. The orchestra played a piece that sounded classical, but was actually an algorithmic composition designed to stimulate alpha waves. Headmaster Sterling took the stage. He looked immortal, not a hair out of place. "We do not build children here," Sterling intoned. His voice amplified across the lawn. "We build structures. We build resilience. We build the future. And the future is not a place for the weak. It is a place for the aligned." Applause. Polite, rhythmic. "Please welcome the exemplar of the class of 2026, Maya Thorne." Julian watched as his daughter walked onto the stage. She wore a robe of deep navy blue. She moved with that same gliding walk, heel-toe. Silent, she stood at the podium. She didn't adjust the microphone. She stood exactly the right distance from it. She didn't look at her notes. She had memorized the speech. "Distinguished faculty, aligned parents, fellow units," Maya began. "Fellow units." Julian flinched. The parents around him nodded. They didn't hear a dehumanizing slur, they heard clarity. "We entered this institution as raw data," Maya said. Her voice was clear, projected perfectly. "We were full of noise. We desired conflicting things. We wanted to play, yet we wanted to succeed. We wanted to be loved, yet we wanted to be strong. We were paradoxes." She paused. 4 seconds. Okavan solved the paradox, she continued. We'll learn that emotion is just unorganized information. We learned that empathy is a resource that must be budgeted. We learned that the variable is the enemy of the constant. She looked out at the crowd. Her eyes scanned the rows until they locked on Julian. My father sits there, she said, pointing a steady hand. The crowd turned to look at Julian. He froze. He is a builder, Maya said. He builds skyscrapers. He understands that a building cannot sway too much, or it will break. He understands that the steel must be rigid. He taught me that love is not a feeling. Love is an investment in stability. She lowered her hand. I stand here today not as a child, she concluded, but as a finished product. I am stable. I am efficient. I am ready to be deployed. Thank you. The applause was deafening, a standing ovation. Parents were wiping tears from their eyes, tears of pride, tears of relief that their investments had matured. Julian stood up. He clapped. He had to. If he didn't, he was the variable. As the ceremony ended, the parents flooded the reception area. Champagne flowed. Julian found himself surrounded by admirers. She's a marvel, Julian. You must be so proud. Excuse me, Julian said, pushing through the crowd. I need to find her. He found her near the buffet table. She wasn't eating. She was observing the line, ensuring that people were taking the appropriate amount of shrimp to maintain flow efficiency. Maya, Julian said. She turned. Father. The ceremony concluded on schedule. Variance was within acceptable limits. Maya, listen to me, Julian said, grabbing her hand. Her skin was cool. We're leaving. We're going on a trip. Just you and me. Somewhere. Messy. Italy. Or maybe a camping trip. No schedule. No metrics. Just. He was desperate. He wanted to break the glass. He wanted to find the little girl who used to ask for a cat. Maya looked at his hand on hers. She looked at his face, flushed and frantic. A vacation is an unscheduled disruption, she said calmly. I have already begun my reading for the secondary tier. I cannot afford the latency. Screw the latency! Julian hissed. You're my daughter! I want to see you laugh. When was the last time you laughed, Maya? Maya tilted her head. She seemed to search her internal database. Laughter is a release of tension, she said. I have no tension. I am perfectly balanced. That's not balance. That's death. Julian's voice rose. A few parents turned to look. Lower your voice, father, Maya whispered. You are creating a scene. You are embarrassing the unit. I don't care. Julian shouted. I don't care about the unit. I care about you. He knelt down, gripping her arms. Maya, please, come with me. Let's get ice cream. Let's get a dog. A messy, shedding dog, please. Maya looked at him. For a moment, just a flicker, something moved behind her eyes. A memory. A regret? But then the wall slammed down. The training kicked in. The system asserted itself. She reached out and gently removed his hands from her arms. Father, she said, her voice soft, terrifyingly pitying. You are compromising your structural integrity. You are becoming emotional. Do you require a recalibration? Julian recoiled as if she had slapped him. What? Headmaster Sterling says that sometimes the parents are the ones who cannot handle the transition, Maya said. He says that sometimes the older generation cannot let go of the chaos. If you are suffering, father, there is a facility. She trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the sweet, smelling air of the garden party. Julian stared at her. He saw it then. The reversal. He wasn't the customer anymore. He wasn't the powerful CEO who had bought a product. He was the raw material. And she was the architect. She had surpassed him. She had internalized the logic of the machine so perfectly that she now viewed him as the glitch. Julian stammered. I'm fine. I'm stable. Good, Maya said. She smoothed her robe. Then let us proceed to the car. I have calculated the optimal route home to avoid the traffic on the bridge. She turned and walked away. Julian watched her go. He saw the other students, hundreds of them, moving in their precise orbits. He saw the parents, smiling, toasting, oblivious to the fact that they were celebrating their own obsolescence. He looked at his hands. The hands that had built skyscrapers. The hands that had signed the checks. The hands that had held her shoulders while she condemned a boy to oblivion. He realized he hadn't built a future for her. He had built a cage. And then he had walked inside and handed her the key. He straightened his tie. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. He composed his face into a mask of successful, contented fatherhood. He walked after her. "Coming, Maya," he called out. "Right behind you." He fell into step, 3 feet behind her, matching her pace. Heel toe, heel toe. The silence of the garden was absolute. It wasn't peace. It was the quiet of a tomb before the stone is rolled into place. Julian Thorne walked into the rest of his life, a shadow trailing the monster he had paid to create. 7 years later, the skyline of Chicago had changed. It was sharper. The organic curves of the post-modern era had been replaced by the brutalist, soaring verticals of the new efficiency movement. And at the center of it all stood the Thorne, Sterling Tower, a needle of black glass that seemed to absorb the light around it. Julian Thorne sat in the penthouse suite on the top floor. It was technically his apartment, though it felt more like a preservation tank. The air was scrubbed and ionized, smelling of nothing. The temperature was kept at a constant 68 degrees, a metric determined to be optimal for geriatric cognitive preservation. He was 62, but he looked 80. His movements were slow, hesitant. He wore a wristband, a sleek, matte, black device that monitored his heart rate, his cortisol levels, and his sleep quality. It buzzed softly if he sat for too long. It buzzed if his blood pressure rose. It was a leash invisible and absolute. The door slid open. It didn't make a sound. Maya walked in. She was 18 now. She was striking, tall, and elegant, wearing a suit that looked like it had been poured onto her body rather than stitched. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it pulled the skin of her temples taut. She didn't carry a purse or a phone. She didn't need to. The building responded to her presence. Lights brightened as she moved. Screens flickered to life. "Father," she said. Her voice hadn't changed. It was the same calm, resonant tone she had used at graduation, only now it carried the weight of authority. "Your biometrics indicated a spike in restlessness. You haven't consumed your nutritional supplement." "I'm not hungry." "Maya," Julian said, looking out the window at the city he used to own. "Hunger is a signal of depletion," she corrected, walking to the counter and mixing a gray powder into a glass of water. "By the time you feel it, your efficiency has already dropped. Drink." She placed the glass on the table, parallel to the coaster. Julian looked at her. He looked for the little girl. He looked for the teenager. He looked for anything that wasn't this polished, perfect machine. "I saw the news," Julian said, gesturing to the wall screen that was currently dark. "The expansion of the Okavan program. You're taking it national?" "Global," Maya said. "The parallel pathing protocol has been adopted by the Department of Education. We are implementing it in public schools starting next fall. The data is irrefutable, Father. Crime is down. Truancy is non-existent. We are curing the variable of youth. You're turning them into drones," Julian whispered. Maya didn't blink. "We are turning them into architects of their own destiny. Just as you did for me." She sat across from him. She checked her wrist, though she wore no watch. She had an internal clock that was more accurate than any Swiss movement. "I have a gap in my schedule," she said. 3 minutes. I wanted to inform you that we are moving you." Julian froze. "Moving me? Where? To the sanctuary?" she said. "It is a new facility. Upstate. The air quality is superior. The noise pollution is zero. You will be with others of your generation. Those who find the transition to the new efficiency difficult." "A nursing home." Julian spat. "You're putting me in a home." "A maximization center?" she corrected gently. Here, you are isolated. There, you will be part of a managed collective. You will have structure. You will be safe. I don't want to be safe. Julian slammed his hand on the table. The water in the glass trembled. His wristband buzzed aggressively, a red warning light pulsing against his skin. Cortisol spike, warning, warning. I want to live, he shouted, standing up. I want to go outside. I want to walk down the street and smell the exhaust and hear a car horn. I want to see a mistake, Maya. I want to see someone trip and fall and laugh about it. Maya stood up. She didn't recoil. She looked at him with a profound, terrifying pity. You are spiraling, father. This is exactly why the sanctuary is necessary. You are addicted to chaos. You mistake friction for life. She reached out and touched his wristband. She tapped a code onto the surface. The buzzing stopped. A sudden, cool sensation flooded Julian's arm, a transdermal sedative. His knees went weak. He slumped back into the chair. Better, Maya soothed. The variance is leveling out. Maya? Julian slurred, his tongue feeling thick. Do you love me? Maya paused. She looked at him, analyzing the question. She deconstructed the semantics, the chemical imperatives, the social contract of the word love. I prioritize your preservation, she said. I allocate my resources to ensure your longevity. I have removed all threats to your stability. If that is the definition, then yes. The data supports the conclusion. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. Her lips were dry and cool. I will have the transport team collect you at 0800 hours tomorrow, she said. Pack nothing. The sanctuary provides all necessary assets. Old possessions carry emotional bacteria. It is best to start clean. She turned to leave. Wait, Julian whispered. The sedative was pulling him down a dark tide. The title. Maya stopped at the door. The title. The story. Julian murmured. His mind drifting back to a time before the silence, to a memory of a script he felt he was living in. The CEO walks into the school, and what he saw was unbelievable. Maya turned back. For the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a creator admiring their masterpiece. You didn't see anything unbelievable, father, she said softly. You saw the mirror. You just didn't like the reflection. She walked out. The door slid shut. Julian was alone. He looked at the glass of gray water. He looked at the black wristband. He looked at the city outside, a grid of perfect lights, blinking in unison, a circuit board of humanity where no current was ever wasted. He realized then what the true horror was. It wasn't that he had lost his daughter. It was that he had succeeded. He had wanted order. He had wanted the best. He had wanted to fix the broken parts of her past, and he had done it. He had fixed her so well that she had fixed the world. He stood up, swaying slightly. He walked to the window. Below, on the street level, 70 stories down, he could just barely make out the movement of the crowd. They were walking. Thousands of them. They weren't jostling. They weren't weaving. They were walking in lines. Perfect straight lines. On the left side of the sidewalk, a stream of gray moving north. On the right side, a stream of gray moving south. And in the center of the sidewalk was empty, a pristine empty lane. No, not empty. Julian pressed his face against the cold glass. There was one figure walking in the center. A child, a small boy, maybe 6 years old. He was skipping. He was hopping over the cracks in the pavement. He was wearing a bright red jacket. A drop of blood in a gray vein. He was a variable. Julian's heart leaped.
Run, he thought. Run, kid.
Be messy, break the line. Then he saw the drones. Two small, silent shadows detached themselves from the streetlights. They descended on the boy. They didn't hurt him. They simply landed in front of him and behind him. They emitted a soft, blue light. The boy stopped skipping. He looked at the drones. He hesitated. Then, slowly, the boy stepped to the left. He merged into the gray stream. He put his hands behind his back. He lowered his head. The red jacket disappeared into the mass of gray coats. The line swallowed him whole. The flow resumed. The efficiency was restored. Julian watched until he couldn't distinguish the boy from the machine anymore. He turned back to the room. He picked up the glass of nutritional supplement. He drank it. He set the glass down. Parallel to the coaster, he sat in the chair. He placed his hands on his knees. He aligned his spine. He waited for tomorrow. He waited for the sanctuary. He waited for the silence to be complete. The CEO had walked into his daughter's school, and what he saw was unbelievable. He saw that the school had no walls, and he was finally perfectly enrolled. THEEND. This story is finished, but the question it asks is still running in the background of your life. Every time you choose convenience over connection, every time you silence a child to keep the peace, every time you demand perfection instead of humanity, ask yourself, who is really being trained? If this story left a mark on you, if it made you look at the world a little differently, please like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next observation.